She was madly in love with her millionaire boyfriend, until one text shattered her world. "I'm leaving you for someone else." 4 years later, fate twists cruelly. He spots her again, more beautiful, more confident, but she's not alone. Standing beside her are two little girls, with his eyes. Now the man who once threw her away is about to learn what happens when the woman you broke becomes the woman you can't live without. Welcome back to Beyond Color Stories. It's so good to have you here again, where love, heartbreak, and destiny collide in the most unexpected ways. Before we dive in, tell me, where are you connecting with me from today? Drop it in the comments below. I love knowing where my amazing viewers are watching from. And if you're new here, don't forget to subscribe and turn on the bell, because you don't want to miss the emotional roller coasters and powerful love stories we share every week. So, take a deep breath and get ready, because this one is going to make you feel every heartbeat. Now, let's dive straight into today's story. I'm leaving you for someone else. Millionaire CEO texts. 4 years later, he saw her, and the twins who had his eyes. The city that night was alive with lights, music, and the faint hum of luxury cars moving beneath the skyline. But inside the glass-walled penthouse, silence reigned like a cruel monarch. Aria Carter sat by the enormous window, her legs tucked beneath her as the lights from the streets below painted golden streaks on her smooth brown skin. Her phone lay beside a half-empty glass of wine, its screen dark, its silence heavier than thunder. She had spent the whole evening convincing herself that Brevis Langford, the man who had made her heart race and her world spin, was just busy, that he would text, call, or walk through the door with his usual smirk that made her melt. She had replayed his voice in her head, the way he called her my heartbeat, the way he once swore she was the only woman who could make him forget his empire. And then, when the screen finally blinked to life, her lips curved into a hopeful smile that would die before it fully bloomed. The message was short, cold, final. I'm leaving you for someone else. For a heartbeat, the world stopped spinning. The hum of the city dulled to nothing. She stared at the words, unable to breathe, as if the letters themselves had pierced her chest. She whispered his name, Brevis, as though saying it aloud would change what she was seeing. But the phone remained silent, its blue glow mocking the tears that welled in her eyes. A trembling laugh escaped her lips, disbelief wrapped in pain. She scrolled up, hoping there was some mistake, some explanation. But there was none. Only older messages filled with love, passion, and promises that now burned like lies. Her hands shook. Her heart thudded so violently she thought it might tear through her ribs. She pressed her palm to her chest as memories flooded her, his hands tracing her spine, the nights he whispered dreams against her skin, the mornings when he held her like she was his world. The betrayal hit harder because it came without warning, without goodbye, without mercy. She wanted to call him, to demand an answer, to scream until her throat gave out. But pride, a fragile yet fierce flame inside her, kept her still. If he had chosen to end their love through a text, then he didn't deserve the sound of her tears. She turned the phone face down and stood, her knees trembling. The room around her looked unfamiliar now. Every corner carried echoes of him, his cologne on the pillow, his jacket draped over the chair, the wine glasses from last night when they had laughed about nothing at all. Now every trace of him was poison. She walked to the mirror, her reflection blurred by tears. "You'll be fine," she whispered, though her voice broke on the last word. Her chest rose and fell as she fought the sob threatening to escape. She remembered his words, "You're too emotional, Aria." He once said it half-jokingly, but now it stabbed deep. Maybe he had always seen her heart as a weakness. Outside, thunder rumbled, a storm rolling in from the horizon, and the sound seemed to echo her breaking soul. She sank to the floor, hugging herself, rocking slightly as memories assaulted her. The night he told her he loved her. The way he brushed her curls away from her face before kissing her forehead. The way he said he couldn't imagine life without her. Lies, all of it. Her tears soaked into her silk robe as she whispered, "How could you, Brevis?" over and over like a prayer that would never be answered. Lightning flashed through the window, illuminating the diamond bracelet he had given her on her birthday, a bracelet she had once called her lucky charm. Now it mocked her. She tore it off and threw it across the room, hearing it hit the wall and clatter to the marble floor. For a moment she thought she would collapse, but something inside her refused to die. Slowly she rose, her hand shaking as she began to gather her things. Every item she touched carried a memory. His favorite mug, the soft throw blanket they shared during movie nights, the photo of them laughing on the balcony at sunrise. She placed them all in a box, each movement mechanical, deliberate, as if she were burying a body. Her old self. Her heart ached so deeply, she wondered if it would ever beat the same again. She paused by the closet, staring at the tailored dresses he bought her, the heels he loved seeing her wear. For a second, she almost smiled at the absurdity of it all. How a man could spend fortunes to dress the woman he'd later discard. Another lightning strike flashed through the window, and in that cold white light she saw herself clearly, not a broken woman, but one who had loved too deeply, too sincerely. As she zipped the suitcase, her phone buzzed again. Her pulse spiked. Maybe he regretted it. Maybe he was calling back to say it was a mistake. But when she looked, it was only a bank notification. Money transferred into her account, the same way he might tip an employee. Her throat tightened. It wasn't a breakup. It was dismissal. A business. Transaction. That single message said what he couldn't. We're done. And this is your closure. Her fingers trembled as she deleted his name from her phone, but she couldn't bring herself to delete the pictures. Not yet. She left the phone on the dresser, staring at the city one last time, before whispering to herself, "You will rise, Aria Carter. Not today, not tomorrow, but one day." Her reflection in the window looked back at her, a woman with tears on her cheeks, but fire in her eyes. Beneath her hand, she felt a flutter, faint but unmistakable. The secret she had been carrying quietly for weeks, the life growing within her, reminded her she wasn't entirely alone. Her lips quivered as she whispered, "I'll protect you. Both of you." A tear slid down her cheek as she rested a hand on her abdomen, her mind torn between love and fear. Brevis didn't know. He had walked away not just from her, but from the heartbeat that was half his. The thought hit her like another storm wave, and for a moment she leaned against the glass, letting her tears fall freely. Outside, rain began to pour, drumming against the window as if the heavens themselves mourned with her. She turned off the lights, leaving only the city glow to guide her steps. Each movement felt final. Every click of her heels against the marble sounded like a goodbye. She packed a few essentials, tucked her laptop under her arm, and pulled her coat tight. The elevator ride down felt endless, the soft music mocking her heartbreak. When the doors opened, the doorman looked at her curiously, as if sensing something was wrong, but she forced a polite smile and said softly, "Good night." Her voice cracked, and she turned before he could respond. The cold air hit her face like a slap when she stepped outside. The city that had witnessed their love now bore witness to her pain. She walked down the steps of the mansion, once their shared dream home, with trembling resolve. Her heels clicked rhythmically against the stone, a steady beat to her breaking heart. Each drop of rain kissed her skin, cold and cleansing, washing away the last traces of his touch. As she reached her car, she looked back at the towering mansion. For a fleeting second, she imagined him inside, perhaps sleeping soundly beside the someone else he'd chosen. The thought made her chest tighten until she whispered, "One day, Brevis Langford, you'll remember this night and wish you hadn't let me go." She slid into the driver's seat, her fingers gripping the wheel as the storm intensified. The windshield blurred with raindrops, mirroring the tears in her eyes. She started the engine, the hum of the car grounding her. "Breathe," she told herself, "just breathe." She drove through the empty streets, the lights reflecting like shards of broken glass. Every red light felt like the universe forcing her to pause, to absorb the magnitude of what had happened. At one stop, she broke down completely, her sobs echoing inside the car. She hit the steering wheel once, twice, before burying her face in her hands. "You promised," she whispered. "You promised me, forever." After a while, when the tears subsided, she looked up at the sky, whispering through clenched teeth, "Never again will I let someone destroy me." That vow, born of pain, became the seed of her future strength. She didn't know how she would survive, but she knew she had to, for herself, for the lives growing within her. As dawn's first light began to creep over the horizon, she drove toward an uncertain tomorrow, away from the mansion that once symbolized love and now represented betrayal. The rain slowed, replaced by a mist that made the world look softer, almost forgiving. When she finally reached the outskirts of the city, she pulled over and stepped out, breathing in the scent of wet earth. The horizon glowed faintly pink, the first hint of sunrise. She wrapped her coat tighter and looked down at her belly, whispering, "We start over now." The wind carried her words away, but she felt lighter somehow. The pain was still there, sharp and unrelenting, yet beneath it, a small flame of strength flickered. She didn't know where she would go, what she would do, but she knew one thing: she would not crumble. She would rise again, and when she did, the world would remember her name. Behind her, the city skyline gleamed, oblivious to the heart it had just broken. Somewhere in one of those glass towers, Brevis Langford slept peacefully, unaware that his message had not only ended a love, but also severed him from the family he didn't know existed. Arya turned one last time to look at the city she was leaving, a faint, bitter smile curving her lips. "Goodbye, Brevis," she whispered. The wind carried her voice like a ghost, a haunting promise that would one day come back to him. She climbed back into her car, wiped her tears, and drove into the sunrise, alone, but no longer defeated. And as the sky brightened, her shadow stretched long across the road, carrying the weight of heartbreak, strength, and a hidden truth. A truth that would one day shatter his world as he had shattered hers. He had chosen another woman that night, but the universe had already chosen for him. The woman who carried his legacy beneath her heart, the love he would one day beg to have back. The sun that rose the morning after Arya left the mansion had felt like an accusation, but 4 years later, that same light gilded her office windows in gold. The world no longer saw a woman running from heartbreak. It saw Arya Carter, founder and CEO of Carter Consult Group, a name whispered in boardrooms and splashed across glossy business magazines. The roads that once carried her tears now carried her purpose. Every rejection, every sleepless night of study while the twins stirred in their cribs, had forged a diamond edge in her will. She had traded trembling hands for steady ones, traded soft pleas for sharp commands that made entire rooms still when she spoke. Yet sometimes, in the hush between meetings, she could still hear the echo of that text, the digital wound that had begun all this fire. She would glance at her reflection in the dark glass, the same brown skin and proud eyes framed by a halo of curls, and whisper under her breath, "You survived him." That reminder had become her prayer. Her mornings began before dawn. She rose, tied her hair, slipped on a fitted blazer, and moved like a woman who owed no one her worth. The twins, Amira and Belle, would pad sleepily into the kitchen, all curls and giggles, their blue eyes so impossibly like Brevis Langford's that some mornings Arya had to pause to breathe. She poured their cereal, kissed their foreheads, and felt both pride and ache twined together inside her. "He'll never know them," she thought sometimes, then chased the thought away. The life she had built did not have room for ghosts. When she dropped them at preschool, the teachers smiled, unaware that their calm, composed mother had once been a shattered girl driving through the rain. In the office, Arya was a storm wrapped in silk. She negotiated contracts that seasoned men feared to touch. Her voice carried the balance of warmth and steel that came only from knowing the price of weakness. Investors listened. Rivals watched. Her assistant often found her standing by the window late into the night, a cup of black coffee in her hand, the city lights reflected like tiny fires in her eyes. "Miss Carter, you should rest," they would say. She would smile faintly. "Rest is for when I have everything my girls will ever need." Each word was measured. Every success was another brick in the fortress she was building around her heart. Yet power came with solitude. Friends invited her to dinners, to charity events, to New Year celebrations, and she always found polite excuses. Love letters appeared in her inbox from men dazzled by her intellect and poise, but she deleted them unread. She had promised herself 4 years ago that no man would ever again be the axis on which her world turned. The warmth she allowed herself belonged to her daughters, their bedtime laughter, the way they demanded stories of queens who ruled kingdoms without kings. When they asked, "Mommy, where's Daddy?" she would answer softly, "He's a story we don't tell yet." On stormy nights, she sometimes woke, heart racing, remembering the sound of his voice. In those moments, she walked to the twins' room, watched them breathe, and found her calm again. "You're my forever," she would whisper. Many cliffhanger thoughts crept in nonetheless. What if fate isn't done with me? What if he ever walks through that door? She would shake her head and laugh quietly at her own imagination. The years hardened her grace. Magazines called her the woman who built an empire from ashes. At conferences, she spoke about resilience, telling young entrepreneurs that strength was a choice. They applauded. No one guessed that the ashes she referred to were the remains of a love that had once consumed her. Then came the evening that changed everything again. The Metropolitan Business Gala, an annual gathering glittering with wealth and whispers, had requested her presence. Arya rarely attended such events, but her board insisted. "Visibility," they said. "You're the face of the new generation." So she agreed. That night, the city shimmered under silver clouds as her car pulled up to the Grand Hotel entrance. Cameras flashed. Reporters called her name. She stepped out in a floor-length emerald gown, the color striking against her warm skin, her curls gathered in a graceful twist. Every head turned. In that moment she was power and beauty combined, the living proof that broken things can shine brighter than before. Inside, chandeliers scattered gold across marble floors, music flowed, laughter swelled, and deals worth millions were being born in every corner. Arya accepted a flute of champagne, but barely sipped it. She had long learned that control was her armor. She moved through the crowd with polite smiles, answering compliments with nods that never reached her guarded eyes. Across the room, 2 women whispered, "That's Arya Carter, the one who outbid Langford Industries last quarter." The name Langford brushed her ears like an old bruise. Her hand tightened around the glass, just for a heartbeat, before she exhaled and forced her shoulders to relax. "Coincidence," she told herself. "There are many Langfords in the world." The speeches began. She sat near the front, her attention half on the stage, half on her phone, where pictures of the twins smiled up at her. The master of ceremonies' voice rose above the murmuring crowd. "And now," he announced, "tonight's guest of honor, a visionary leader who transformed his company into a global powerhouse. Please welcome the CEO of Langford Industries, Mr. Brevis Langford." The name slammed into her chest like a physical force. Applause erupted around her, chairs scraped, people stood. For a moment she couldn't move. The world blurred, the air thinned, her pulse roared in her ears, her fingers went numb, and the champagne flute slipped slightly before she caught it. She told herself she must have misheard, but the spotlight swept toward the entrance, and there he was, Brevis Langford. Taller than memory, tailored suit gleaming midnight black, the same ocean blue eyes that had once looked at her with love and then with indifference. He walked onto the stage with calm authority, shaking hands, smiling that careful, practiced smile of a man used to winning. The years had etched sharpness into his features, but even from a distance she recognized the man who had once texted her goodbye. Her breath caught. She felt time fracture, half of her still the woman who had driven away in tears, half of her the unbreakable queen she had become. Around her, cameras clicked, people whispered, but Arya heard none of it. Mini cliffhanger energy pulsed in the air as he began his speech, his deep voice resonating through the hall. She willed herself to stand, to leave, to protect the peace she had built brick by brick, but something stronger held her in place, a mix of rage, curiosity, and a strange, cold calm. Her mind whispered, "After 4 years, the storm has found me again." And while the crowd applauded the powerful CEO on stage, Arya Carter lifted her chin, every line of her body composed, her heart a silent battlefield of frost and fire. The night was about to rewrite the story she thought was finished. As the applause faded, Brevis Langford's gaze swept the audience and stopped, frozen mid-sentence, when his eyes locked with hers across the glittering hall. The ballroom glowed with the glimmer of crystal chandeliers, their golden reflections rippling across marble floors polished to perfection. Laughter floated through the air, mingling with the soft hum of violins and the scent of vintage wine. Every guest was draped in power and elegance, yet among the sea of glittering gowns and tuxedos, one man stood apart. Brevis Langford, the name whispered with reverence in corporate circles, the tycoon who ruled empires with the flick of his wrist. But that evening, the confidence he wore like armor began to crack the instant his gaze landed on her. Arya. She stood at the entrance like a vision pulled straight out of his forgotten dreams, her poise calm and magnetic, wrapped in an elegant black gown that shimmered with subtle grace each time she moved. The soft lighting kissed her skin, bringing out the warmth of her complexion and the quiet strength in her posture. Time didn't just slow. It shattered around him, leaving nothing but the echo of her presence. His breath caught, a soundless ache clawing at his throat. For a heartbeat, the noise of the gala vanished. He saw not the guests or the stage, not even the glasses clinking or the smiles plastered across investors' faces. All he saw was the woman he had once texted goodbye to, his cruelest mistake now standing before him, radiant, untouched by the ruin he had left behind. But something else pierced deeper than memory. 2 little girls, one on each side of her, holding her hands with childlike trust. Their dresses were matching white, their curls bouncing with innocent joy as they looked around the grand ballroom with wonder. And then, those eyes, blue, sharp, familiar. His own reflection staring back at him from faces so small yet so unmistakably his. The glass in his hand trembled before slipping from his grasp. The crash of crystal against marble sliced through the music like a scream. Heads turned. Conversations faltered. The crowd's gaze shifted toward the powerful CEO, who, for the first time in his public life, looked undone. His chest constricted, and an invisible weight pressed down until it was hard to breathe. Memories assaulted him in waves, her laughter echoing in the sheets, her sleepy voice whispering his name, the last look she gave him before everything broke. Guilt, sharp and unforgiving, rose up his throat, leaving his tongue dry and useless. He'd told himself she'd moved on, that she'd been nothing more than a fleeting chapter. But seeing her now, strong, beautiful, untouchable, made that lie crumble like ash. Arya turned at the sound of the breaking glass, her movement slow, graceful, deliberate. Her eyes found his instantly, and for a moment that stretched like eternity, silence swallowed them both. Her gaze was calm, too calm, and it burned more than anger ever could. She didn't flinch, didn't let the storm he carried see her tremble. She simply looked at him with that composed confidence that came from years of surviving without him. The man who had once been her world now looked like a stranger lost in the wreckage of his own past. The music resumed softly, almost mockingly, as if the universe refused to pause for his heartbreak. Brevis couldn't move. His legs felt rooted to the floor, his heart thundering like it might burst through his ribs. How had he missed 4 years of her life? How had he not known she was raising his children? 1,000 questions clawed at his mind, but none left his lips. He watched her approach the host table with effortless grace, speaking to business elites with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. Every gesture she made, every word she spoke, carried a poise that screamed success and independence. She no longer looked like the woman he left crying in the dark. She looked like someone who had learned to live without love, someone who didn't need him anymore. That truth cut deeper than any rejection. He wanted to walk to her, to apologize, to fall to his knees if that's what it took. But the fear of what he might hear froze him. Would she even listen? Would she throw his own words back at him? "I'm leaving you for someone else?" His own text, cold and heartless, echoed in his mind like a ghost he could never silence. The irony burned. He, the man who had everything, now stood helpless in front of the only thing he truly wanted but could never buy back. Arya felt his stare even before she turned fully. Her heart clenched, but her face remained serene. The sight of him, the man who once made her laugh, cry, dream, brought back memories she thought she had buried for good. For a second, her composure wavered when her daughters squeezed her hands. They had no idea who the man across the room was, and she intended to keep it that way, for now. Brevis Langford had already taken enough from her once. He wouldn't steal their peace too. A waiter whispered something to her, gesturing toward the host who looked uneasy. "Mr. Langford will be addressing the crowd shortly," the waiter said. Arya's heart gave a painful twist, but she nodded. Of course he was the guest of honor. The irony couldn't have been more cruel. Brevis's assistant rushed to his side, whispering, "Sir, are you all right?" "You look pale." He didn't answer. His eyes remained glued to Arya and the twins beside her. The music shifted to a slower tune, the lights dimmed, and the announcer's voice rang out. "Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Mr. Brevis Langford, CEO of Langford Industries," to the stage. The words felt distant, meaningless. He wasn't ready for this, not while she was here, not when every fiber of his being screamed her name. He walked toward the stage, his steps mechanical, each one heavier than the last. The crowd applauded. Flashes went off, but his mind was somewhere else. Back in that old apartment where she had once cooked for him, where she had laughed freely before he destroyed everything. His speech faltered, his usual eloquence lost. From the corner of his eye, he caught a glimpse of her again, standing tall, unreadable, her daughters giggling softly beside her. And suddenly, his voice trembled. The audience thought it was emotion for the company's success, but only he knew the truth. It was her. She was the ghost in his lungs, the silence between his words. As he stepped down, applause echoing behind him, their paths crossed again near the staircase leading to the balcony. The air between them thickened with everything unsaid. Her perfume drifted through the air, familiar, haunting, unforgettable. For a moment, neither spoke. Then she smiled politely, a smile that didn't belong to the woman who once loved him, but to a stranger meeting a business acquaintance. "Mr. Langford," she said, her voice smooth but edged with quiet strength. "I believe we've met before." The words struck like lightning, polite yet slicing deep enough to draw unseen blood. The crowd continued to swirl around them, but to Brevis, the world had narrowed down to her eyes. Those eyes that once looked at him with love, now reflecting nothing but distance. His mouth opened, but no sound came out. The man who once commanded boardrooms, who silenced competitors with a look, now stood wordless before the woman he broke. Arya turned first, her daughters tugging gently at her gown, unaware of the storm brewing between the adults. She walked away, her heels echoing softly, each step like a quiet declaration of strength. Brevis watched her leave, his heart twisting painfully with the realization that maybe, just maybe, this time he was the one left behind. And for the first time in years, Brevis Langford felt fear, not of failure, not of loss, but of the possibility that he had already lost the only thing that ever truly mattered. The air inside the ballroom felt heavy, suffocating in its luxury and golden glow as Brevis Langford stood frozen, replaying her voice like a haunting melody he couldn't escape. "Mr. Langford, I believe we've met before." Her words were polite, poised, but they carried a sting sharper than any blade, slicing straight through the man who once thought he was untouchable. The world continued to move around him, laughter, champagne, the faint hum of the orchestra, yet Brevis's heart beat to a rhythm of regret, hollow and desperate. He watched Arya's retreating figure, her elegance unmatched, her every step a reminder of what he had thrown away. And beside her, the two little girls who mirrored his soul, their blue eyes, his mother's eyes, looked up at her with pure innocence, unaware of the storm their existence had just ignited inside him. He couldn't breathe. The man who once commanded rooms, who made billion-dollar deals without a flicker of emotion, now stood trembling with a glass of shattered pride in his hand. People around him whispered, wondering what had caused the powerful CEO to lose composure. But Brevis didn't care. The only thing that mattered was her, Arya Carter, the woman who once believed in him more than he ever did in himself. And he had destroyed her. When the gala ended, Brevis lingered in the corner, his eyes never leaving her. He watched as she gathered her things, gracefully greeting others, her smile effortlessly masking the storm he had caused years ago. His heart pounded when she stepped outside into the cool night, the hem of her gown brushing against the marble floor. He followed, hesitant at first, then desperate, his footsteps echoing softly behind hers. The rain had begun to fall, soft and steady, as if the sky itself felt the ache between them. "Arya," he called out, his voice rough, uncertain. She stopped, but didn't turn around. The twins clutched her hands tightly, their sleepy eyes blinking up at her as if sensing her tension. "Arya, please," he tried again, his tone breaking. Finally she turned, her face illuminated by the parking lot lights, breathtaking, composed, and yet her eyes betrayed 1,000 unshed tears. "Mr. Langford," she said evenly, "is there something you need?" The distance in her voice burned him more than her anger could have. He took a step closer, rain beginning to dampen his suit. "Are they?" he began, voice trembling, his eyes flickering toward the twins. But she stopped him with a sharp, cold look. "Don't," she said, her tone firm. "You don't get to ask questions now." The silence that followed was deafening. The rain grew heavier, drops running down her face like diamonds, though he knew they weren't tears. Not anymore. She had cried enough for him once, and she would never let him see her broken again. "You left me, remember?" she whispered, her voice steady but filled with the weight of memories that refused to fade. "By text." Those two words, "by text," hit him harder than any boardroom betrayal or financial loss ever could. He saw flashes of that night, her messages left unread, the way he turned cold out of arrogance and fear of attachment. And now, the reality of what he'd done crushed him. "I was a fool," he murmured, stepping closer, his voice trembling in the rain. I thought I was doing what was right, that love made me weak. Her eyes softened for a fraction of a second before hardening again. You were right about one thing, she said quietly, her lips curving in a bitter smile. Love did make me weak, for a while, but that weakness is gone now. She bent down, opening the car door as the twins climbed into their seats, giggling softly, oblivious to the heartbreak their parents were reliving. Brevis took another step closer, desperate. Arya, please, let me explain. Explain what? She interrupted sharply, slamming the door. That I wasn't enough. That you found someone else better through a text message? Her voice trembled now, not from fragility, but from years of pain she had buried deep inside. Her tears had dried long ago, replaced by steel. You made your choice, Brevis. And I made mine. She turned to leave, but he reached out, his hand brushing against her arm. The touch sent a shock through both of them, a flicker of the past, a memory of what once was. For a heartbeat, she froze, torn between the ghost of the man she had loved and the reality of who he had become. I never stopped loving you, he confessed under his breath, his words nearly drowned by the storm. Arya looked at him then, really looked. And for a moment, the mask she wore cracked, revealing the ache beneath. But she didn't let it linger. You loved yourself, Brevis, she said quietly. Not me. With that, she stepped back, her gaze steady, her pride radiating stronger than the storm around them. Goodbye. He watched as she walked to her car, her silhouette blurred by rain, her grace unshaken. The sound of the car engine roared to life, and through the window he saw the twins turn to look at him. Their eyes, those piercing blue mirrors of his soul, locking onto his for a fleeting second. It was as if destiny itself was reminding him of what he had lost. As the car rolled away, disappearing into the misty night, Brevis stood motionless in the downpour, the water soaking through his expensive suit, washing away the last remnants of his arrogance. The mighty CEO, once feared by rivals and envied by millions, now stood alone in the rain, humbled, shattered, and consumed by regret. His heart thudded painfully against his ribs as he whispered to himself, I will earn it back. I will earn them back. The rain answered him with silence, but inside a vow was born, one forged not from ego, but from longing and remorse. He tilted his head toward the sky, letting the cold rain sting his face, punishing himself for every tear she must have shed. The image of Arya's back as she walked away burned into his memory, a reminder that love, once taken for granted, was not easily reclaimed. Still, he swore that this would not be the end. Somewhere deep in his chest, where once pride had lived, hope began to flicker, faint, fragile, but alive. And as thunder rolled across the night sky, Brevis Langford whispered her name into the storm, not as a command, not as a plea, but as a promise. A promise that he would find the man worthy of standing beside her again. The rain fell harder, drowning out the noise of the city as he stood there drenched and broken. But for the first time, Brevis Langford felt something real. The battle for her heart had only just begun. 5. The rain had stopped hours ago, but its echo stayed with him, a rhythm in his chest that beat with regret and determination. Brevis Langford was not the same man who had once looked at love as a weakness. That man had drowned in the downpour the night Arya drove away. The one who emerged from the storm was quieter, humbler, and consumed by a single purpose, to make her see that he could change. His mornings began earlier, his nights ended later, but the work that filled his schedule now had a new center. Every decision, every meeting, every breath was haunted by the vision of her walking away, and by the soft laughter of two little girls whose eyes he could never forget. He began to appear everywhere she was, not in the shadows of obsession, but with the patience of a man seeking redemption. At charity events, he would stand across the room, never imposing, always waiting for her eyes to find him. At corporate gatherings, he would let his company quietly sponsor the causes she championed, his name tucked into the background like a whispered apology. Once, at a children's hospital fundraiser, she caught him crouched beside a child in a wheelchair, smiling gently, listening. The sight shook her. This was not the cold billionaire who once sent her away with a text. This was someone learning to be human again. But her pride, built from the ashes of his betrayal, refused to soften. Arya told herself that his appearances were calculated, that he wanted forgiveness as another trophy. She told herself that he was still the same man, vain, powerful, unreachable. Yet every time she saw him, her heart betrayed her. The same heart that had rebuilt itself brick by brick after he shattered it began to tremble under the weight of his gaze. When he sent flowers to her office, she left them untouched. When he sent handwritten letters, she tucked them away unopened. But each gesture left a mark, not on her desk, but in her thoughts. His words, even unread, felt different from the man who had once broken her. Brevis, meanwhile, fought a different battle inside himself. For the first time in his life, he worked not for empire, but for love. He began supporting her foundation anonymously, investing millions into programs that helped single mothers and disadvantaged women, the very people Arya had vowed to uplift after her own heartbreak. He never took credit. His satisfaction came from seeing her smile at the success of another project, even if she didn't know his hand was behind it. The irony wasn't lost on him. Once he had been the source of her pain, now he lived to ease it, even from afar. Every encounter between them was a test of will. At a business conference, when she presented a proposal, his applause was the loudest in the room. She glanced toward him, her expression unreadable, but her pulse betrayed her. At a playground one sunny afternoon, as he stood watching the twins from a distance, they ran up to him with childish curiosity. "Hi," one of them giggled. "You look like Mommy's friend." His heart clenched as he knelt to their height, unsure what to say. Arya noticed, rushing to them, her tone brisk but not cruel. "Girls, it's time to go," she said, avoiding his eyes. But the moment lingered, soft and fragile, like the beginning of forgiveness. That night she couldn't sleep. She told herself it was anger, but deep down she knew it was something else, something dangerous and familiar. His voice from the past, low and tender, echoed in her memory. "You taught me how to love." She shook it off, pacing by the window, whispering, "Don't fall for it again, Arya. Don't." But the truth was already creeping through the walls she'd built. Meanwhile, Brevis sat in his penthouse, surrounded by silence. The city lights outside reflected against the glass, painting him in loneliness. He poured himself a drink but left it untouched, staring at the rain starting to fall again. He remembered her every word, every wound he had caused. He had lived his life commanding the world, yet couldn't command her forgiveness. The thought humbled him, broke him, and drove him to try harder. He began to do the small things she had once begged him to notice, the little acts of humanity that never fit into his old world. He took time off work to volunteer at her charity events, blending in among her staff rather than standing above them. He sent books to her office with notes quoting the very poems she once read aloud to him when they were younger and in love. She pretended not to notice, but when she was alone, she would trace her fingers over his handwriting and whisper, "Why now?" One afternoon, fate threw them together again. A major corporate partnership brought their companies into the same boardroom. Arya arrived poised and focused, her presence commanding respect. Brevis was already there, looking every bit the CEO, but softer around the edges, the arrogance that once defined him replaced by quiet determination. The meeting went on with professional civility, but every glance between them carried a storm of unspoken words. When it ended, she turned to leave, but he called after her gently. "Arya, may I speak with you for just a moment?" She hesitated, her team watching curiously, then nodded for them to go ahead. When they were alone, he stepped closer, voice trembling. "You don't have to forgive me," he said, "but please, believe that I've changed." She crossed her arms, her jaw tightening. "You broke me once," she said coldly. "I survived. I don't need you." Her words were sharp, but her eyes, her eyes, betrayed the flicker of emotion she fought to hide. Brevis lowered his head. "I know. But maybe you don't need me. Maybe I need you, to be the man I should have been." Her breath caught. For the first time, she saw no arrogance in him, only raw honesty. It terrified her because it was easier to hate the man he used to be than to forgive the one standing before her now. Without a word, she turned and walked away, her heart pounding, leaving him standing in silence. But as she left, her steps were slower than before. A small, invisible thread between them tugged tighter, impossible to sever. Days turned into weeks, and his persistence never wavered. He didn't chase, he waited. He didn't demand, he proved. Every action was deliberate, patient, grounded in remorse. Her friends noticed. "You're still thinking about him," one teased. Arya rolled her eyes but couldn't hide her blush. "He's just trying to look good," she said. Yet even as she said it, she caught herself watching the news reports of his philanthropy and feeling something warm bloom inside her. One stormy evening, after a tense board meeting that left her drained, Arya stepped outside the building, rain pouring in sheets around her. The city glistened under flashes of lightning. She didn't notice the black car parked nearby until a familiar voice broke through the rain. "You shouldn't be alone out here." She turned slowly, and there he was, umbrella in hand, drenched despite it, eyes filled with worry and yearning. For a moment, neither spoke. The thunder drowned out their silence. Then Brevis took a hesitant step forward, the rain hitting his face. "I keep waiting for the right time," he said softly, "but there isn't one, is there?" There's only now. Arya's heart raced as she met his gaze, the storm swirling between them like a reflection of everything unsaid. He stepped closer again, offering the umbrella over her, their shoulders, almost touching. "Why do you keep showing up, Brevis?" she asked quietly, half angry, half trembling. "Because I can't let go of the only thing that ever mattered," he answered. The honesty in his tone disarmed her. For once, she didn't know how to reply. The rain fell harder, soaking the edges of her coat, but neither moved. He looked at her with an ache that words couldn't contain, and she, despite herself, didn't walk away. Mini cliffhangers hung between every breath, every raindrop, as they stood inches apart under the storm. Something had shifted. The man who once left her for someone else was now standing in the cold rain, refusing to leave her side. And this time, Arya didn't step back. She didn't speak, didn't smile, but she also didn't walk away. The thunder cracked overhead as their eyes locked, and for the first time since that text years ago, Arya let herself feel the pull she'd been fighting. The storm around them raged on, but in that moment, both of them knew the war between love and pride had just begun. 6. The rain came down in silver sheets, drumming softly against the darkened street, as if the heavens themselves mourned all the lost years between them. Arya stood still beneath the storm, her black coat clinging to her frame, her eyes glistening with a war she no longer had the strength to fight. Brevis stepped closer, his expensive suit soaked, but he didn't care. He had stood in boardrooms commanding empires, yet here, before her, he was nothing but a man stripped bare of pride. "Why, Brevis?" she asked, her voice trembling, fragile yet sharp enough to cut through the storm. "Why did you throw us away? Why did you let go when all I wanted was you?" Her voice cracked on the last word, and it pierced him deeper than any loss he had known. For a moment he couldn't speak. His throat constricted as memories of that cruel text, the cowardly message that ended everything, flashed in his mind like lightning. "Because I was blind," he finally whispered, his voice rough with regret. "Because I thought love made me weak. But losing you—" He swallowed hard, eyes dark with pain. "Losing you broke me." Arya turned her face away, tears blending with the rain until they were indistinguishable. Her heart wanted to forgive, to reach for him, but pride was a fortress she had built too carefully to let crumble now. "You don't get to say that," she said softly, though her voice lacked its usual steel. "You don't get to show up after 4 years and claim to be broken." Brevis's chest heaved, rain sliding down his face like the confession he had waited years to make. "I deserve that," he admitted, stepping closer. "I deserve your anger, your silence, your every cruel word. But I don't deserve the chance to love you again, unless you let me prove I've changed." The sincerity in his tone startled her. It was the first time she had ever seen the mighty Brevis Langford look truly defeated. A thunderclap echoed above, startling her as he reached for her hand, his touch hesitant, as if afraid she'd vanish if he held too tightly. For a second she froze, the warmth of his palm bleeding into her skin through the cold rain. Her heart raced, old memories flickering, his laughter against her neck, the way his hands used to hold her at night, whispering promises he never kept. Her lips parted, but no words came. "Give me a chance, Arya," he said quietly, his breath visible in the chill. "Not to erase the past, but to build a new one." His words lingered in the air, heavy and sincere, cutting through the sound of the storm. She looked up at him then, really looked, and for the first time she didn't see the man who had left her. She saw the man who had been lost without her. The rain fell harder, but neither of them moved. Cars passed, headlights casting brief flashes of gold and silver on their faces, like fate itself illuminating their fragile truce. Arya's chest rose and fell, and slowly she let him hold her hand fully. His fingers tightened slightly, not possessive, but pleading. "You think you can just show up and fix what's broken?" she murmured, eyes locked on his. "No," he said immediately. "I just want to be there while you heal it." Something inside her cracked, a small fracture in the walls she had built, and though her mind screamed to walk away, her heart stood still, listening to the rhythm of the rain and the sound of his truth. She turned her face to the sky, letting the cold drops kiss her skin, trying to hide the tears that mingled freely now. "You hurt me, Brevis," she whispered, her voice trembling with suppressed emotion. "You hurt me in ways you'll never understand." He nodded, shame tightening his jaw. "I know," he said, "and if I could take it back, I would. Every cruel word, every moment of silence. I'd rewrite it all if it meant I could see you smile again." The rain thundered between them, yet somehow his words reached her like a whisper against her heart. Her lips trembled. "Do you even know what you destroyed?" she asked, stepping closer, her eyes burning with equal parts love and fury. He took a shaky breath. "Yes," he said simply, "I destroyed my home." For the first time in 4 years, silence stretched between them, not as an enemy, but as something fragile, sacred. She could see the ache in his eyes, the weight of years lost, and it tore at her resolve. Slowly, cautiously, she placed her other hand on his chest, feeling the steady thrum of his heartbeat beneath the soaked fabric. "You don't get to break me twice," she warned softly. His hand rose to cover hers, warm and trembling. "I won't," he vowed. "I'd rather die than lose you again." Her eyes searched his face for a lie, but found none. Just a man standing in the rain, stripped of everything but love. Lightning flashed across the sky, painting their silhouettes in white. The storm around them raged, but inside, something tender rekindled, a flicker of the love that had once burned them alive. He took a breath, leaned closer, and his voice came out barely a whisper. "I still love you." The words hung in the air, soft and dangerous. Arya's eyes widened slightly, the wind tugging at her hair, and though 1,000 reasons to walk away crowded her mind, not one found its way to her lips. She didn't deny it. Her silence was an answer in itself. He exhaled shakily, a breath he hadn't realized he was holding, and for the first time in years, hope bloomed where despair had lived. The rain softened, turning into a gentle drizzle as if the sky itself had calmed. They stood there for what felt like forever, two souls bound by regret, rediscovering a rhythm that neither had forgotten. And though no promises were spoken beyond that moment, the air between them whispered of something new. Forgiveness, fragile and uncertain, yet real. Brevis stepped back slightly, eyes lingering on her as if afraid the spell would break. "I'll prove it, Arya," he said quietly, determination lacing every word, "even if it takes my whole life." Her lips curved faintly, almost imperceptibly, but her eyes betrayed the spark of something she couldn't hide: hope. A car passed by, splashing water over their shoes, pulling them back to reality. She glanced toward her vehicle, then back at him, her heart torn between logic and emotion. "Don't make promises you can't keep," she murmured. "Then I won't promise," he replied. "I'll just show you." That line, soft, resolute, almost a vow, hung between them like a lifeline. And for the first time since that fateful text years ago, she didn't look at him with hatred. She looked at him with the faint, trembling memory of love. As the rain slowed to a whisper, she turned and began to walk toward her car, and Brevis didn't stop her. He simply watched, hope flickering in his chest like the first light after a storm. But as she opened the car door, she paused and looked back over her shoulder. The sight of him, drenched, exhausted, vulnerable, made her heart ache in ways she thought she'd buried forever. "Good night, Brevis," she said softly, her voice barely audible. "Good night, Arya," he whispered back, his chest tightening. And as she drove away, her taillights fading into the night, he stood beneath the rain with a trembling smile. Because for the first time in years, she hadn't walked away with anger. She'd walked away with something far more dangerous. For both of them. As thunder echoed one last time, Brevis whispered into the night, "She still loves me." But behind the storm clouds, fate had already begun weaving the next test of his heart. Morning sunlight streamed through the tall windows of Arya's townhouse, spilling over the polished wooden floors like liquid gold. The soft chatter of her twin girls filled the air, their laughter echoing down the hallway as they played with their dolls. Arya stood at the kitchen counter, a mug of coffee warming her palms, but her thoughts weren't on the day ahead. They were lost in the memory of last night. The way Brevis had spoken, his voice trembling, his eyes pleading, had stirred something deep within her, something she had spent years trying to silence. She hated that his words still reached her, that his presence still lingered even after everything. But as she looked out the window and saw the early morning light chasing away the shadows, she couldn't help but feel that maybe, just maybe, life was offering her a new beginning. When she arrived at the office that day, the building felt strangely brighter. Her team greeted her with smiles, the air humming with purpose. She was the kind of woman who commanded respect effortlessly now, a far cry from the fragile heart that had once shattered under a text message. Yet, beneath the confidence and poise, a part of her still trembled whenever she thought of him. As she reviewed proposals in the boardroom, her phone buzzed once. A message flashed on the screen. Lunch? Same place as before. Her breath caught. She didn't have to guess who it was. Against her better judgment, she found herself walking into the little cafe they once frequented, the same corner table waiting for her. Brevis was already there, his usual suit traded for something softer, a blue shirt with the sleeves rolled, his expression unguarded. "You came," he said quietly, almost disbelieving. "I told myself I wouldn't," she replied, sitting down, "but curiosity won." His smile was faint but real. "Then I'll thank your curiosity." Their conversation was tentative at first, like two people relearning each other's language after years apart. He spoke about how he had changed. The sleepless nights, the therapy sessions, the way he'd built something new from the emptiness she left behind. Arya listened, half skeptical, half moved. She could see the cracks in his pride, the sincerity in his eyes when he talked about regret. "You hurt me beyond words, Brevis," she whispered, staring at her cup. "You made me believe love was a weakness." His response was quiet, almost broken, and I made myself believe power could fill that emptiness. I was wrong for a long time. Silence stretched between them, heavy but not cold. There was something fragile blooming there, a second chance neither had dared to imagine. Days turned into weeks, and slowly, almost imperceptibly, he began weaving himself back into her world, not with grand gestures, but through quiet acts that spoke louder. When the twins had a school recital, he sat quietly at the back of the hall, tears gleaming in his eyes as he watched them sing. When Arya had a charity gala, he made sure her foundation received anonymous donations, ensuring her projects thrived. Every little thing he did was a step toward redemption. Sometimes she caught herself smiling when she saw him playing with the twins, his laughter mixing with theirs. The sight was disarming. A man once so ruthless, now softened by love he no longer took for granted. Her friends noticed it too, the way her eyes warmed whenever his name came up, though she would deny it with a quick change of subject. One evening, after a long day of work, Arya came home to find the twins asleep on the couch, wrapped in a blanket. Brevis sat nearby, a book in his hands, reading aloud in a soft voice that melted the air. He looked up when she entered, his eyes reflecting something she hadn't seen in years: peace. "They wanted a story before bed," he said with a small smile. "I hope you don't mind." Arya shook her head, unable to speak for a moment. It felt natural, seeing him there, as though he belonged. The sight tugged at something deep inside her chest, the ache of lost years slowly giving way to the comfort of the present. When he stood to leave, she found herself saying, "Stay for dinner." It wasn't planned, but it felt right. Dinner was quiet at first, filled with the clinking of cutlery and the occasional soft laugh from him when the twins sleepily mumbled in their dreams. Then Brevis looked across the table and said, "You know, I used to think success meant having everything under control. But now, I realize it means knowing what you can't live without." The words sank into her heart like sunlight after a storm. She didn't respond, but the look in her eyes said enough. Later, as he was about to leave, she walked him to the door. The hallway light caught in her hair, making it glow, and he reached out hesitantly, brushing a strand from her cheek. "Arya," he murmured, his voice rough. "This time, it's forever." Her breath trembled as she met his gaze, the years of pain and longing melting into a single heartbeat. His lips found hers, soft, deep, and real, carrying all the words they had never said. Just as the world seemed to stop spinning, two small giggles echoed from the hallway. "Mommy," one twin whispered, rubbing her eyes, "are you kissing our daddy?" The question hung in the air like a spark. Arya froze, her cheeks flushing as she pulled back slightly, but Brevis only chuckled softly, kneeling down to their level. "Yes," he said with a warmth that melted the room. "Your daddy was asking for another chance." The twins giggled louder, clapping their tiny hands, and the tension dissolved into laughter. Arya looked down at them. then at him, her heart swelling with an emotion too big for words. In that moment, surrounded by love, she realized she had forgiven him completely, not because he deserved it, but because her heart was finally free. As the night deepened, the city outside hummed with life, but inside their home, everything felt still, sacred. Brevis tucked the twins into bed, whispering stories of stars and promises, and when he turned back to Arya, she stood in the doorway watching him, her eyes glistening. "You've changed," she said softly. "No," he replied, walking toward her. "I've found what I was missing. You." Their hands intertwined naturally, as though the universe had simply been waiting for them to find their way back. And as the clock ticked softly in the background, both knew this was no longer the ending of a painful story, but the quiet, golden beginning of a new one. As the lights dimmed and the twins' gentle breathing filled the house, Brevis turned to her and whispered, "Next time, Arya, I'm not letting go." She smiled faintly, resting her head on his chest, and somewhere deep inside, love bloomed again, stronger, wiser, and finally, forever. The soft hum of the evening settled gently over the Langford estate, the air warm with the fragrance of jasmine and flickering candlelight. The twins had long fallen asleep, their tiny breaths echoing faintly from the nursery upstairs, leaving the house draped in a tender silence that felt like peace itself. Downstairs, the living room glowed with the kind of quiet magic that only comes when love has found its way home again. Arya stood near the window, her silhouette outlined by the pale silver of the moon. The soft folds of her satin gown shimmered like liquid midnight, and the reflection staring back at her was no longer a woman broken by betrayal, but one reborn through strength, forgiveness, and grace. Behind her, Brevis watched quietly, his heart swelling with awe. For years he had dreamed of her, but seeing her there now, in his home, in his life, and in his arms again, was beyond any redemption he thought he deserved. He took a step closer, his voice low, reverent. "Arya," he whispered, and the way her name rolled off his tongue carried more devotion than he'd ever known how to give. She turned to face him slowly, her eyes soft yet steady, glowing in the candlelight. For a heartbeat, they simply looked at each other. Two souls that had weathered every storm, finally standing still. He moved closer, his hands trembling as he brushed a stray curl from her cheek. "You taught me what love really means," he murmured, tracing the line of her jaw. "It's not possession, it's devotion." The words came out almost like a vow, and Arya felt a shiver run through her. Tears welled in her eyes, not from sadness but from the weight of the moment. "And you taught me," she whispered back, her voice catching, "that forgiveness is power." Her lips curved in a small smile, tender and knowing. He cupped her face gently, his thumb wiping a tear that escaped before it could fall. For the first time since that fateful night years ago, there was no pain between them, only the quiet, certain understanding that they had both changed, and that love, true love, had survived the wreckage. He leaned in then, his breath mingling with hers, the world around them fading until there was only the sound of their hearts. Their lips met in a kiss that was nothing like the fiery chaos of their past. It was gentler, deeper, filled with the kind of love that no longer sought to conquer, but to cherish. His hands moved to her waist, drawing her close as though to remind himself that she was real, that she was here, and that she had chosen to forgive him. The taste of her tears mixed with his own as their kiss deepened, slow and reverent, a sealing of wounds long healed. When they finally pulled apart, Arya rested her forehead against his, her breathing unsteady. "We've both been through hell," she whispered, "but somehow we made it back." Brevis smiled faintly, brushing his lips against her temple. "No," he said softly, "we didn't make it back. We built something new." They moved to the couch, the candlelight flickering against the walls like whispers of their past. Brevis poured 2 glasses of wine, the clinking of crystal breaking the silence. "Do you remember?" he said, his tone light but wistful. "The first night you cooked dinner at my place." "You burned everything," Arya laughed, her eyes sparkling. "That was your fault." "You wouldn't stop distracting me, and I don't regret it," he said, his smile deepening. "Not a single moment." She shook her head, laughter mingling with warmth. It felt so natural, so right, to sit there with him like this, as though time had bent itself to give them back what it once stole. As they talked, the walls between them dissolved completely, replaced by memories that no longer hurt, only healed. Hours passed unnoticed. Outside, the moon climbed higher, bathing the world in a soft glow. Brevis took her hand and stood, pulling her gently toward the grand piano in the corner of the room. "Dance with me," he said, his voice tender. "There's no music," she teased softly, but he smiled. "There doesn't need to be. I can hear our song." And so they danced, barefoot, slow, moving to the rhythm of their hearts. Her head rested against his chest, feeling the steady thrum beneath his shirt, the same heartbeat that had once broken her now beating only for her. He held her as though the world might end if he let go, his hands tracing gentle circles against her back. For the first time in years, Arya felt completely safe. Not because he was strong or powerful, but because he had learned how to love her gently. When the candles burned low, they found themselves standing by the balcony doors, the night air warm against their skin. The garden below shimmered with moonlight, the flowers swaying like they too were celebrating the reunion of 2 souls long meant to be. Brevis turned her toward him, his expression solemn yet filled with joy. "Do you know," he said softly, "every night I prayed for one more chance, not to undo the past, but to prove I could be the man you always believed I could be." Arya's eyes glistened. "You've done more than that," she whispered. "You became the man I needed." He smiled, and in that moment, every scar they had carried, every tear they had shed, felt worth it. They stood together for a long time, watching the night unfold in quiet harmony. Then Brevis drew her closer again, his voice barely audible. "Never again, my love," he said, his tone a solemn vow. "Never again will I let pride steal what my heart has already claimed." She looked up at him, her lips trembling into a smile as she whispered, "And I'll never stop believing that love, our love, was always meant to find its way home." Their lips met once more, not in passion this time, but in absolute peace, a kiss that spoke of forever. Later that night, when the candles had melted down to their wicks and the house lay wrapped in silence, they sat together on the couch, her head on his shoulder, his arm around her waist. The clock ticked softly, the kind of sound that once filled lonely nights, but now only marked the beauty of the present. "Do you ever think," Arya murmured sleepily, "that maybe everything happened exactly the way it was supposed to?" Brevis brushed a kiss to her hair. "Yes," he whispered, "because it brought me back to you." And as the moonlight kissed their skin, Arya closed her eyes, feeling his heartbeat steady beneath her ear, a rhythm that promised constancy, a future built on truth, and a love reborn stronger than pride, pain, or time. The woman who once walked away in tears now rested in the arms of the man who would spend the rest of his life proving that love, when rebuilt with humility and devotion, could be eternal. The night faded into dawn, painting the sky with hues of gold and rose. Upstairs, the twins stirred, their laughter echoing faintly as morning light filled the house. Brevis looked down at Arya, still asleep in his arms, and smiled, A man who had once lost everything, now holding the very reason he'd found himself again. Arya, the woman who rose from heartbreak, had found her peace, and Brevis, the man who once let her go, finally found his forever in her arms. The story that began with a text of betrayal ended in a whisper of love, soft, enduring, and infinite, and that brings us to the end of this unforgettable story. A tale of heartbreak, redemption, and a love that refused to die. Sometimes losing everything is what it takes to truly understand what love means. If this story touched your heart, make sure to subscribe to Beyond Color Stories and join our growing family of listeners who believe in love that conquers all. Don't forget to like, comment, and share your thoughts. Tell me what moment hit you the hardest. Your support means everything. Until next time, stay inspired, stay strong, and never stop believing in the power of second chances.